I have a military and an academic background. The military background, I served 28 years U.S. Army, retired as lieutenant colonel. I did 6 years active duty and 22 years in the reserve. My last duty assignment was Baghdad. As a reserve officer, I was very active for 8 years in a special reserve unit that did operational level exercises for regular Army, National Guard, reserves, all across the eastern part of the United States. And that was a very interesting experience in itself, but that was our specialty function. And we were very good at it, and I'll talk a lot about that today. The other part in my career, PhD in history, military historian specialty, I was hired and I worked for 14 years at a school for strategy for the U.S. Air Force, teaching operational strategic levels of war to Air Force officers. I was also a professor at the U.S. Army Command and Staff College. I also taught in the reserve course for the Army War College. And then I went to be dean of the Baltic Defense College, which is the staff college of the 3 Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. And there, again, I was heavily involved in operational level military education. So I have more than 2 decades of being involved in developing, planning, executing operational military exercises, education, training, and it's been a great career. What I'm going to emphasize today is how we do operational level exercises. And good exercises are the key to a well-functioning military, the operational level. And the operational level I will define as simply something above battalions. We're talking brigade and larger military units and operations. And at the operational level, you require certain things. You require first a very good base level of individual training and small unit training, and then you move on to training higher. And for operational level training, it is mainly about teaching skills and decision-making at a higher level. We're talking of training commanders and staffs how to do things. And in the modern military, and this applies to very small armed forces and very large ones, most of the education and training at the operational level is in simulations exercises, in which the only people involved are the commanders and their staffs, and the actual troops and equipment and action is done in computer simulations. In every country, for practical budget reasons, it's simply too difficult and expensive to actually move thousands of troops to big empty areas and do maneuvers. We do it in a military simulation center set up with computers, different rooms, and we have the military, the team being exercised, whether it's division, a large operational unit, and then we have an opposing forces, and then we have the controllers. And I'm basically, today, I'm going to explain a kind of practical guide to how we put together large-scale exercises. Today in NATO have very good simulation centers. And they're very much a Western model. I'm very much at home when I go to Austria. And they have simulation centers. They actually can tie in to grander NATO simulations, and they can play internationally in very large-scale simulations. And a small country like Estonia has a very good modern simulation center, exactly like the ones I worked with in America. I've seen one of the best I've seen is in Poland. And again, they're very much a standard Western fixture, and where they can play large units. And very often a smaller country like Estonia will play their forces in a larger multinational military exercise, a simulations exercise. So even smaller countries today learn military doctrine and system as part of a larger multinational force. Because today, and this is what we train Americans in too, is that modern operational level conflict is usually multinational, and you have to incorporate all of various allies under a common doctrine. And NATO, by the way, has a common doctrine. It's called the Combined Operations Planning Directive, the COPD, which is a standardized system for doing planning and doing operational briefs and writing your operations orders. So your military operational level education and doctrine is actually quite international among the Western countries. You expect a small country today, and it's not just the NATO countries, Austria will participate in international NATO simulations exercises, which I found very interesting. And they know and understand and play with NATO doctrine, because if you have, let's say, a peace enforcement operation in Africa, you will have, let's say, Austria has been very involved. In Afghanistan, you had countries like Lithuania, actually was the lead country for a provincial reconstruction team. And smaller nations actually played lead roles within a multinational system. And one thing we learned at the Baltic Defense College is that to be effective and to play a real role is that you have to be completely versed in essentially the Western doctrine or the NATO standard doctrine and system. So we train to an international standard, which is known, and this makes it in a lot of ways easier, because with an international standard, you know what kind of role you'll play. You can actually, as you said, you can punch above your weight. You can play a significant part. One thing we found in Afghanistan, which in the end I don't think has gone very well. However, there was a big learning curve, and a lot of the smaller countries played a very important role. And so this is what we educated at the Baltic Defense College, is that smaller armed forces can still play a significant role in large-scale military operations.